So, Zack, tell us a little about you and your work advising and acting for developers as a planning barrister in London.
As you say, I practice in planning law, and the focus of my work relates to applications for planning permission for new development of all sorts. Often it's residential development, commercial development, retail, new schools, railways, infrastructure, all sorts of things, all of which gives rise to the need for planning permission in the UK. In real life, what it means is that you are in the High Court, often in London, dealing with judicial reviews, challenges to the grants of planning permission. You are, and this is my bread and butter really, offer planning appeals. This is where the proceedings can get a little bit paper heavy in a way that I think we'll probably be coming back to later on. Planning inquiries, which essentially are like the trials that can go on for weeks on end in front of government-appointed planning inspectors who fulfill the role of a judge. And up until very recently, one of the side effects of that job was a very bad back, because traveling from one case to the next involved boxes and boxes and boxes of paper. and until the pandemic, really, that was the way it was.
So would you say that was one of the unique things about the nature of your practice, that a software tool such as LiquidText has been able to positively impact?
Absolutely. I think that the key impetus for me looking for a solution beyond the software that I was using, this would have been in 2020, so this was sort of early lockdown time in the UK. I'll explain the relevance of that in a minute. The key impetus was not so much for my court case work, where often the nature of the court work I do, you can carry around the bundles in, say, a big rucksack, maybe, something like that. You know, it's doable. You can hop on the bus or whatever, hop in a taxi with your bag, and that's everything that you need for the court hearing. The planning inquiry work is a completely different beast, and you find that you are making travel decisions on the basis of how on earth you're going to get all of these boxes of paper around the country with you. You know, so you are, for example, you couldn't get the train because you've got a half a room's worth of boxes. You spend hours working out how to transport these boxes around the country, and so dealing with not just hundreds, but sometimes thousands and thousands of PDFs, of separate PDFs, and trying to make that work in a practical way, that I was desperate for a solution, to be honest.
Well, dealing with such a mountain of material sounds like a crisply defined problem. Can I ask you how you heard about and came to use LiquidText to solve that problem?
It was a recommendation. It was good old-fashioned word of mouth. It was a good friend and colleague at another chambers in Manchester said, as I was moaning about the situation that I found myself in, he said, "Have you tried this?" So it really is as sort of boring and old-fashioned as that. It was a recommendation from another barrister, and he was, I think, uncharacteristically evangelical about the proposition. And so that got me thinking, because I mean, literally up until this point, I was either doing it all hard copy, printing everything out, boxes and boxes of paper, or when I was managing it digitally, it was a question of, having 50 tabs open at once. I mean, it's absolute car crash of a way of actually trying to deal practically with cases where you've got lots and lots of documents. So I was very open to something new, and I tried it on his recommendation, for which I'm very grateful.
What were the specific features or other factors that drew you to the app?
It sold itself to me very, very quickly. The utility of it was almost immediately obvious and sort of earth-shattering to me. I don't want to sort of be hyperbolic about it, but I realized that this was going to be a very, very different way of being able to do things. Being able to import, if you like, dump all of the PDFs associated with a single case or a single site or a single development scheme or whatever it might be into one place, to adapt, highlight, note, scribble all over those PDFs just as you would in a normal PDF reading bit of software, but then to be able to extract and link the extracts together that I'd never seen anything like that before, and still haven't. And so it was that ability to extract and link between the extracts that has taken it to a totally different level for me. I mean, putting it into, if you like, old money, as we say, or thinking about the way we used to do it. For a barrister like me, the big sort of the thing that takes the time in preparing for a case is when you are presented with your mountain of paper or your bundles or whatever it might be. You start at the beginning and you turn one page at a time and you drop your yellow post-it notes all over everything. You've got your highlighters and your pens and your scribbling, and you might have an A4 pad next to you as you're taking notes of the important thing and page references that you want to come back to. And you work all the way through to the end of that bundle or those bundles, however long they may be. And your best friend, really, in that process is your highlighter, your good old trusty highlighter, and your post-it notes. That's what you're doing. You're going through the bundle. You're processing it. You're identifying the critical bits that you want to come back to. Those all important extracts, and all litigators and barristers of all sorts, I think, are familiar with what that's like. LiquidText offers the ability to do something similar, but altogether more sophisticated and flexible and useful. You're doing the same sort of thing when you're going through the bundle in a PDF form, but the ability to extract parts of that bundle, to manipulate them and to link them together so that you can instantaneously move from one page to the next it's not really comparable in terms of how much more efficient it is, I think. And that's why I invariably find that nowadays, now that I'm the one in the inquiry or in the court hearing that's using LiquidText, when it comes to hunting down a document or whatever it might be, hunting down a page reference, I'm there, minutes ahead of the judge or the inspector or the other counsel in the case, literally, and it's remarked upon because it's so much more efficient and easy to navigate very large volumes of material.
Would you say there was an aha moment, or was it just love at first sight?
It was love at first sight. It does feel a little bit like I've become evangelical about this app, but it's not just me. I go along to these events often when I'm working with a large team of professional consultants, solicitors, all sorts of people who sit alongside me when I'm doing my cross-examination or my closing speeches or whatever it might be. They sit behind me or alongside me and they see what's happening on my computer screen. And I honestly cannot tell you how many times it has happened after one of these events that someone approaches me and says, what was that? What were you, how are you doing that? Well, we couldn't see what you were doing, but it seemed as if you almost had multiple documents all on the go on a single interface. And I have said so many times, I've got to give you this link. I've got to give you this link. So it was a little bit of love at first sight. There have been a number of aha moments, though, that have sort of come almost down the track as I've used the app now for years. Two big ones stick out, if you like. The first was the first time that I used it on an iPad, because the up until, well, certainly for the first, say, 6 months plus or whatever, I was using the app only on my my MacBook. So using the full Mac OS. And I was loving it, and it was working very well for all the reasons that I've previously been over. But then moving on to the iPad, which I did, and incorporating the stylus was a big shift, because then the functionality increases even more. The ease of use increases more. I think almost it feels more intuitive somehow, and the ability to use the stylus to scroll, which is something that I do an awful lot of, is all over the PDFs and in the workspace area on the right-hand side of the screen to just sort of scroll incessantly was a big shift. So there's something more intuitive and almost tactile about being able to use the stylus and indeed your fingers, when you're dragging things around on the iPad. But I think having both the iPad version and the, if you like, the desktop version or the Mac OS version is invaluable for me. I use them both. I use them for different things, actually. And so that leads to the second aha moment, which was when the syncing was introduced. That was big for me. I was following the release of tweets on the LiquidText Twitter account, every sort of week, waiting to see when are they going to do this, when are they going to do it, and they were tantalizingly sort of trailed every month or two. It's coming. I signed up immediately for the syncing between my Mac and my iPad. And that was the moment from there on that it's been an absolutely kind of complete answer to everything that I'm trying to do. Because now I can work anywhere on any of my devices. I find, as I said earlier, that I use the versions of LiquidText for different things. I use them both every day, every hour of every day of my working life. But if, for example, it's a case of importing and arranging lots and lots of documents, which is normally what I have to do. It takes me several hours at the beginning of a case. Here are all the documents. We've got to sort them out, got to arrange them, got to index them, get them all into a reasonable order. I'll use my computer, my desktop and my laptop to do that side of it, because it's much easier. I find to sort of drag and drop and all of that using the traditional Mac OS. And then when it comes to actually delving into the documents, linking between them, extracting from them, manipulating them, scrolling all over them, I sort of move over to the iPad. So the ability to sync the work that I've done on both sets of devices was really, really critical and, fantastic for me.
Was there some sort of evaluation process that you used?
Yes, I did. It's a good point. I did start using it more for advisory work, for conferences or for producing written opinions, where there was a lot of paper, but there was not that need under pressure, under the stony-eyed gaze of a judge or a planning inspector, to locate the page at that particular moment. And there is always, I think, a fear. Well, I think there's often a fear of going into, say, a courtroom without the comforting weight of a paper bundle in your hand. There is something, I think, that gives people a lot of sort of almost security. If they've got their bundle, they know that it's not going to run out of battery. They know that the monitor's not going to snap in half. There's something obviously very, flexible and durable about just good old-fashioned paper. And so I think there is a lot of colleagues I know struggle with the idea of going into, say, a court hearing or whatever with nothing more than your laptop or your iPad or a combination of the two. But once I got comfortable with using the software, it doesn't take that long really, I realized that not only would it be, if you like, equivalent to using a sort of paper bundle in a courtroom hearing, it would be better. And indeed, it has been better. And I think, for me, once I'd started down that path, it started to become quite difficult to justify going back. I use LiquidText more than any other piece of software, including all the standard office products that you would expect. Obviously, we do spend time on those too, but I use LiquidText essentially all day, every day, because I have all of my cases that sit within it. And what is so useful and unusual, I think, about it is that for someone like me, lots of barristers or litigators are familiar with the idea of picking up a case that you've not perhaps looked at for weeks, months, sometimes years. And if you have a meeting that relates to that case or a conference, and you've got to jog your memory pretty quick, it can be quite a painful process trying to pick up all of that long forgotten information. What is really amazing about the way that the LiquidText sort of workspace works is that you open up a case, whatever it might be, and it's all there immediately, and all of the links, all of the notes, and indeed all of the ways in which you arranged those notes and the order in which you set things out takes you straight back in without missing a step. When you think about what the alternative is to that, i.e. opening up, 40 or 50 PDFs or more, trying to work out where on earth the pages are in those individual PDFs that you want to sort of think about, reread, have regard to, it's a massive time saver. And I do not remember when it was that the synchronization service was added to it, but that, as I say, when that was added, that was a real game changer for me, because all of a sudden it became a bit of a one-stop shop.
How important is a stylus to the way that you work with LiquidText?
It is important, and I didn't realize how important it was until I started using a stylus. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, my first, say, 6 months or so using the app was simply on the laptop. And that, of course, does more or less everything that you're after, more or less all of the things that I've described already. But adding the functionality of the stylus was really important, because there is something tactile about it. The ability to use handwriting, as it were, over the documents, between the documents, and the spaces between the documents is very important. And the ability to link the documents, to draw links between the documents with the stylus, to extract from the documents, drawing boxes with the stylus and all the rest of it, I do think is more intuitive, more tactile somehow, and more almost sort of reminiscent of a good old-fashioned pen than dragging a box with your trackpad or whatever it might be. So I do think that using the stylus adds an extra dimension, an important extra dimension to the app. And as I say, in the end, having used both, just the laptop version, just the iPad version, I now just use both, and I use them for different tasks, essentially, different aspects of a project. I'll use the laptop LiquidText, then move over and pick up the stylus when it comes to the annotating bit, the getting into the documents, highlighting, linking, extracting, that kind of thing. I do find it more intuitive with a stylus. But when it comes to importing and arranging them in the first place, I'd find it easier to do that with an old-fashioned laptop. So yeah, a bit of both, but I think the stylus does make a big difference.
So it sounds like you're effectively using it 24/7, certainly for all your professional hours.
It does, for better or for worse. For my sins, I do use it all the time, more than anything else on my desktop, as it were. And as I say, what is remarkable for someone like me who is used to carrying around or arranging to be carried around boxes and boxes and boxes of paper just for a single case, as it were, and what a pain that was and what a difficulty it was, is being able now to have the entirety of a case on your iPad in your hand in a way that you can actually use when you're going off to, say, cross-examine someone or whatever, or to make submissions to a judge. It's changed everything. And for me, I mean, it really has. And at the end of the working day, when you're off at an inquiry or off at a court hearing or whatever, at the end of the day, you close your laptop, switch off your iPad, chuck it in the rucksack, and off you go, as everyone else is starting the laborious process of loading up these boxes and bringing around a van or a Jeep or whatever to load them all into the trunk of. You're off, and it really does feel like a completely different way of working.
Would you say that your level of understanding then is expert?
It's very difficult without knowing the way other people use it. There are certainly terms that I've seen on some of the updates that I don't really understand. So I'm loath to call myself an expert, but I'm certainly someone who uses it regularly, every day, for hours every day. And I have used it on projects that are, very, very complicated and involve thousands and thousands of documents. So I'm expert to the extent that I've used it not just as I started off with for projects where, there was a handful of documents, But for things that are as complex as anything that I've done, and I've used it exclusively for those projects, I've gone completely paper free, which is something that a lot of my colleagues are sort of interested in, tentatively, I think nervously interested in, but are worried that, you know, they can't quite achieve. I think that this is the way of doing it.
Does it actually change the way you think about analysis, taking notes, drawing legal conclusions, making persuasive, effective arguments?
Absolutely. It saves an enormous amount of time, I think. And part of the reason why is if you compare it to what in the old world you would have had to do in order to process a case and to prepare in advance of a hearing or whatever. In the old world, as it were, you're talking about, as I said, the post-it world, the highlighters, getting your ruler out, your pen and underlining things as you go. You're talking about making notes on the side with a A4 pad or whatever it is of all the things that you're uncovering and discovering. And you're writing down page 48, I should have a look at that. And then you get to page 148 and you think, hang on, there was something relevant that was a few pages back, but I can't remember where it was. And you flip back and you find it and you add that to your note. It takes a very long time. That's part of the joy of it, but part of the sorrow is quite how long preparing for these hearings can take. And LiquidText transforms the way you go about it. You're doing at least 2 or 3 things at once. You are preparing your notes by dint of drawing out these extracts and putting them onto your workspace at the same time as you're highlighting, your tabbing, if you like. And what's really the extra special bit, if you like, and what does affect your extent of understanding of the material that you're working on is the way in which you start to draw out links, because that is, in the end, you know, that's the magic. That's the special sauce on top that you just cannot physically do using an old-fashioned bundle, and you certainly can't do it with a traditional PDF reader either. It's not simply a matter of drawing out extracts. It's then you start to draw the links between them, and you can move sometimes hundreds or thousands of pages apart within the documents instantaneously. And that, you know, that's absolutely game-changing, because for the people who do the job I do, where very often it is about uncovering that kernel of information, which is not on page 1 or page 2, but right at the back of the bundle, inevitably on page, 999, there it is, and linking that piece of information back to something that you may have read many, many hundreds of pages before. You can do that visually on using LiquidText in a way that is so quick and easy, and you can obviously spring between the pages. You can bounce back and forth instantaneously. And so, yeah, that function is not only a time saver, it is a time saver. There's no doubt about it. Once you become familiar with the way the software works, you start whizzing through papers in a very different way. It's not only a time saver, it does actually assist you in being able to process and understand the papers that you're being given and to identify those links. And so, who would not want, in a job like mine, software that assists you in doing that, which is one of the hardest things that we have to do.
You're using things like annotations, the color coding, and the pinch gesture to bring together the color-coded sections of often disparate documents. Tell us about that.
The pinch thing often makes my colleagues gasp with that they can't believe that it looks like magic. Have you done that? Being able even just to search through a PDF for the instances of a word, which of course a normal PDF reader can do, but not only that, but then to pinch together on the iPad all of the instances where that phrase appears so that you can see them all at once, and then you can extract from them, you can annotate, you can link. Is intuitive, it's very clever, and more than that, it saves time, but it also aids understanding, because you're able to see at a glance the ways in which the thing that you're after, the phrase or whatever it is appearing, not just once, but every time. And ditto, the ability to say, work through a document, a particular PDF, highlight it as you go, and then right at the end, pinch together all of the highlights. You can see then straight away, at a glance, in an instant, all of the things that you've decided as you've been working through are relevant in that document. You see them straight away, and that saves you so much time. So yeah, the pinching is a very, very clever feature, and it works, I think, particularly well on the iPad. It works on the laptop as well, but going over to the iPad, because you are able physically to use your fingers to do the pinching, it was even more effective, I think.
LiquidText, of course, allows excerpts to be dragged into that right-hand margin area called the workspace. How are you using workspaces in the course of your legal activity?
The workspace, to me, is absolutely fundamental to what LiquidText is all about. I think it's more than anything what differentiates it from a traditional PDF reader is the concept of the workspace and how that happens. Because as I said earlier on, what is so magic about it is to be able to switch on the program, pull up a project, and you immediately see everything there in front of you all at once, all of the links, all of the extracts, links to all of the PDFs and indeed all the scrawlings and the highlightings and everything else. You can see it all there in the workspace at a stroke. So the workspace is enormously important. And actually, for now, and for me nowadays, the key process of preparing, as I have been today, all day, for a trial or for a hearing or whatever, is actually getting the workspace on my LiquidText in order, getting it tidy and ordered. I've got to say, in my real life, in my non-digital life, I'm not a very tidy person, but my LiquidText workspaces are absolutely spotless, and everything is at perfect right angles. So really, really useful and important to be able to get your workspaces in order. I do really value the ability to zoom out all at once and to see it all at once. Even, as I say, for really, really big cases. So that's why at the moment I've managed all of my cases on a single workspace, but I can certainly see in the future there may well be circumstances where using multiple workspaces becomes a good idea.
Zack, have you recommended LiquidText to fellow barristers? And I guess if you have, what do you tell them to expect?
I'm laughing because I recommend it all the time, and indeed it's become a bit of a joke with some of my colleagues in my chambers how much I go on about it, which I think is it's slightly embarrassing. I recommend it constantly, not only to barristers but also to solicitors and indeed to planning consultants, architects, all the people who I work with in my day-to-day who themselves are dealing with the same sorts of projects, very, very paper heavy projects, and have the same sorts of justification for using LiquidText that I do, because of course it works for lawyers, but you don't have to be a lawyer to use it. So I recommend it all the time, and particularly when it comes to barristers, what I tell them to expect is that they will, if they're interested in trying to achieve it, they will be able to go paper-free and to do hearings and inquiries and trials and all the rest of it paper-free properly, I think, for the first time. Because before a solution like LiquidText, I don't myself think that going fully paper-free was a viable proposition for the more complicated cases. It does take a different sort of solution in order to not just match paper, but to exceed in some ways, I think in most ways, the capabilities of what you can do using paper. And so what I tell them is that it's going to change your practice because you won't need to print anything. It's as simple as that. You just won't need to print anything, and you will find soon enough that it's not a question of, if only I could print it, which I think a lot of my colleagues do enjoy, printing things almost for the sort of safety blanket of having something in hard copy in your hands. You'll find that you don't need to and you don't want to, because it's actually more efficient and more effective to use LiquidText than doing things in the old way.